Hey guys, this is Harry from Zero's Geckos and the Gecko Pod, vlog number 4. The last few vlogs, I did it kind of lazy. I didn't want to put in any extra connections or audio equipment, so I was just recording it off of my this camera right here, my podcast camera, and I was recording it straight onto the SD card and using the microphone on the camera, so that's why it sounded kind of tingy and wasn't full. But I realized that the audio and the video were pretty bad. So I have all the gear, I just wasn't using it. So for the vlogs, I just wanted to make it more simple, and I'm still going to keep it simple, but since I have this equipment here and I'm sitting here, I decided to just simply plug in 2 plugs, and now here we are with nice audio, nicer video and lighting. And so thanks for bearing with the last few vlogs. I realized I should put in a little bit more work into the vlogs, but yeah, I don't have an intro or anything like that. I kind of like it like that, even for the Gecko Pod. I know some people have suggested that we put in some intro clips, some music. I was on AJ and I, we were both on MJ's Trap Talk podcast, and he has an entire intro all decked out, super fancy, and I think that's awesome. A lot of podcasts do, actually, even for YouTube, right? YouTube vlogs and all these tech reviews and product reviews, they all have it all decked out. And here we are living in the old school times where I'm just recording off of this video camera on an SD card with no audio. And so I upped it a little bit with the audio and video. I still probably won't have any fancy intro or anything like that. It's not that I don't want it, but I don't know. Maybe in the future, I don't know. But anyway, vlog number 4. This is Monday today as I'm recording. Yesterday, I took a poll on my broadcast channel. Let me show you guys. So if you see here, I have this broadcast channel, Geckos Business Community. So I click here, I took a poll, and the poll is it okay to buy geckos just to flip for profit? And a good amount of people voted. Let me read it to you. The highest voted one was 108 votes, said no intention to profit, but I'll sell animals that don't fit my projects. The second one, most voted, was only 30 votes. Yes, it's okay to flip geckos, but I'll mainly sell my own and flip only a few occasionally. The third one is 14 votes. Yes, it's a normal business practice. No shame. People shouldn't worry so much about it. The fourth one is 12 votes. It's okay to buy big lots of wholesale animals to sell. A lot of people do that, actually, from AC or whomever. It's pretty common. 7 votes said, not sure. I guess they're still trying to figure it out, to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And then only 2 or 3 people said, not okay to flip, just make and produce your own to sell. And so the point of this poll is not a trap. Some people would message me and would ask some clarifying questions and whatnot, and it's not a trap. It literally is not. None of these polls that I'm doing is meant to trap or make people feel bad. My whole idea and purpose in doing these is to collectively see where we stand. And I feel like the sample size is not bad, right? Out of however many people that saw the thing, about, 150 people voted. And so it's a decent sample size for the gecko community. The whole idea is to understand where people stand in terms of their idea of what's right and what's wrong, and to be able to show people that certain things are probably more okay than you think it is, right? So I'm not saying it's okay to flip for all situations, but I think in general, most people are okay with selling animals at a profit. And obviously some people move animals at a loss, like myself, dummy. But I think there's various aspects of where you can buy a wholesale batch of animals, and cherry pick some of them, raise those up, breed those, and then sell the rest. I wouldn't consider that a bad thing, right? And so I think the conversation to be had is that things are probably more okay than we make it out to be sometimes, right? We can say the same thing for the topic of line breeding, right? When I came into the hobby, there were a lot of people that were pretty hardcore lineage. You need to have as many outcrosses as possible, and those are all good things, right? If you're still there, totally okay. But as I've kind of gone through the seasons, a couple seasons, more and more, and people I notice worry less about lineage. Right? Some people don't even ask for parent pictures, and I think that's okay. Right? I think there's a shift in understanding of what's right and what's wrong. So these topics of line breeding, of flipping, of how you keep your animals. Is it okay to import from Korea and support them instead of US? I think I I love having these conversations not to stir crap up, but to understand that we all have decisions to make, and we don't always have to nitpick every single detail of how every single person operates. Does that make sense? So, I was talking to a couple breeders from this poll. They messaged me and we were chatting, and they were interesting because one of them was trying to explain that, it's a little bit more nuanced, that, it's not just about is it right or wrong in terms of flipping, like, and it got me to think that, okay, I think from these polls and from some of the drama we've seen in the hobby, I see that there are two different thoughts when it comes to certain things. Meaning, one idea and thought and stream and influence of thought comes from hobbyists, pure hobbyists, right? They have maybe a handful of geckos, maybe 50, 100 or less, right? And they're not in it to necessarily make money. Again, in the last vlog, I said we all do it for the money to some degree, right? It's not that we're trying to like squeeze as much money out of the animals as much as possible, but if we sell animals, you're making money, you're doing it for the money, right? And again, that's okay. But I come to realize that from the polls that a majority of people are hobbyists, meaning they're purely hobbyists. They have their own full-time jobs and they have these geckos as they collect geckos and breed them as a side hobby. And they go to shows on weekends, occasional weekends, and sell a few geckos, and they enjoy it, right? Working on the projects. Totally okay. That is a huge majority of this hobby. The other hand are those that are full-time business, or maybe even 3/4 time, gearing towards trying to be more full-time. I think the thoughts and the breeding practices and the selling practices of those people are a little bit different. There is a lot more wiggle room when it comes to certain aspects of business. And, talking to these couple breeders, I see that it's not a false dichotomy that you have to love your pets and not make money on them, or you're just a heartless machine, right? It's not one or the other. You can love these animals, you can work on your projects, you can love the community and the hobby, and at the same time, you can have a robust business. You can be a business person, businessman or a businesswoman, and just grind and love this aspect of fusing your passion of business and your passion for animals and combining them into one. That is completely fine. And I think where we have a lot of arguments is how we disagree with how things are kept, group housed in smaller bins, flipping animals, line breeding. So pure hobbyists, they have a different mindset when it comes to how things are kept, how things are run. Sometimes I feel like those that are pure hobbyists, they can be more critical sometimes of how other people do things that are more geared towards trying to grow a business at a quicker pace. And I think having these conversations and these polls is to kind of try to bridge that gap between pure hobbyists and those that are trying to build out a business from their passion of the animals. So this aspect of flipping and flipping animals, some people think very business mind, and sometimes it feels a little bit snaky to some of us, right? We feel like, oh, if you can't see these animals as just like money makers, right? Like you have to love them, you have to care for them, and I think sometimes we kind of miss that aspect that, yeah, maybe you do care for them and you can still build a really good business. When big breeders mass produce these animals, then it feels a little bit heartless, and maybe that rubs a lot of hobbyists the wrong way. And I don't think it has to be like that. I do think that we should have a level of care is maintained, where you're not just raising animals in the tiniest shoe boxes, tiniest pencil boxes, and then just selling them, right? I also think there needs to be more wiggle room than we make it out to be. So, some breeders, some hobby breeders will be like, okay, if they're not in these 18-18-24s or these 12-12-18s, then, oh, you're a bad person, right? I disagree with that. I don't think that every single animal needs to be housed in such a big enclosure. I don't think that every single animal needs to be housed individually either. I used to think a lot of these thoughts. I think talking to a lot of bigger breeders has kind of helped me to understand more that we don't have to say that there's only one way to do it. I think when we say there's only one way to keep animals, that's when things get a little bit touchy. Also goes to flipping, right? There's not only one way to make money off your animals. Also line breeding. There's not only one way to pair animals. There are more ways to do things that are okay. And I think the hobby in general needs to understand that. The more we understand it and the more we put more thought into it, the less feisty and touchy and sensitive will be to how people do things. I think it's interesting when we see kind of our hobby and the community attack itself, right? It seems constant that something's going on, and we always have to chime in and jump and attack people for whatever practices is going on, right? And sure, certain things should be addressed, certain things should be brought to light and called out. And there's always room for that, but I do think that we take it too far. I feel like we're more sensitive than we need to be. I don't know if that's just the product of our generations, our younger generations. I'm a millennial, right? I think we are more sensitive than we need to be. And I don't, obviously everybody has a voice. This is just my opinion. It's not, authoritative. And, this is just my own voice saying these things. But, we've all seen that, people have been called out for such minor things and just nitpicking at little tiniest things. And that drives me crazy, right? For the most part, I'm pretty quiet when it comes to drama, or at least I'll try to keep to myself. And I'll have thoughts and strong opinions and things that I think shouldn't be, but I'll try to keep to myself. Most things don't need to be called out, in my opinion. There are certain things that are so minor that are called out and people make us think about, and I think that's ridiculous. Just people are just super sensitive over like the tiniest things, and I think we can change that. I think we can be better at that. It just causes lots of unnecessary drama when we pinpoint the tiniest things out publicly, right? If you have a group of friends and a group of 2 or 3 people that you want to, vent to, by all means, like, no one's stopping you from your voicing your thoughts, but also no one's stopping you from voicing your thoughts publicly. But what I'm trying to say is, once you put your voice out there publicly, shaming people specifically by name, I think that's when you get into territory that isn't the best. Unless that person is like a true villain trying to kill their animals, doesn't care about anybody or their animals, and they're doing super shady things, then sure, like, bring that to light. But we nitpick so many things that I feel are unnecessary. It causes unnecessary drama, and it's a constant mudslinging fest. And it's sad to see from grown-ass adults. Everybody is watching each other, and I think we're all just not the best examples for each other, and so all that to say, when it comes to these polls, my hope and my goal is that we can understand that, okay, some people literally will buy geckos to flip, and whether or not I agree with how certain practices are done, I'm I'm not gonna shame people publicly for that, right? I'll have my own opinions and I'll operate how I think is the best. And I might not think everyone operates in the way that they, in general should. At least I wouldn't do that, but it's minor enough where it's okay. So I think people should understand people will operate in certain ways that you might not, but we don't have to cause a stink about every single thing. The more we are okay with kind of keeping in our own lane and just doing things that we believe are good and teaching others that this is how you do it without name shaming people, I think that is the way forward. Friend groups aren't immune to this either. A lot of times we have kind of these groups and cliques of people, and I understand that like AJ and I are close. Brian's a good friend, and if one of us does shady things, I'm not gonna protect people that do shady things, right? I will protect this aspect of how people are attacked, how things are brought up, the tactfulness of engaging each other in conversation rather than name shaming. But if anybody, including myself or some of my friends, do anything shady or things that are questionable, then we can have that conversation. And this goes to a conversation that I had with another breeder about this idea of who has the loudest voice and how is the community swayed. And so I understand that the Gecko Pod does have a voice in the community. It might not be the loudest voice, but it is a voice. AG and I have this podcast, and we interview a lot of the bigger breeders and even new breeders, and we try to incorporate as many people as possible. But what I'm trying to say is that I understand that the Gecko Pod and even this vlog and even my socials, it is one voice. And how sometimes certain voices have more sway in the community than others. And so if you're on the outs or you don't have that connection, then your voice isn't heard as much, right? And so this breeder and I, this friend, we're chatting about that. And, I said, yeah, I mean, to some degree, that's true. And maybe it's frustrating that certain people can sway the community more than the other. But the fact is that we all have a voice, right? Maybe your socials and your circle isn't as wide yet, but we do have a voice. And my goal is to give as much power to the community as possible, right? So I see the Gecko Pod as, from whatever influence that we have, I do find a responsibility in it that we should be a voice of reason, that we can collectively bring more and more voices to be heard so that people can hear and learn and grow, right? So a bunch of the breeders that we interviewed, I don't necessarily align with how they operate and how they do things and how they run their businesses, but that is totally fine, right? I have nothing against them when they're running their own business. I'm going to run things differently than other people, and I'm not going to make a big stink about it. When it comes to group housing, when it comes to flipping geckos, when it comes to line breeding, when it comes to how they keep animals in group housing or bins or whatever, right? I'm not going to make a big stink about it because I trust that these people love their animals, they care for them, and they're trying their best to also support and maintain a business that can then further the hobby, can bring more new breeders in, and build the community in general. right? So each of us has a part to play in our reach. The Gecko pod can only reach so far. I mean, we don't even have that big of a reach, if to be honest. Maybe I'm blinded by how far reaching the Gecko pod is, but I still feel like we're pretty small time. I believe that each breeder, small, medium, or big, has a part to play in this community. And so when people operate and do things a certain way, and you can tell some people are shady and some people are not. Most people are good people. Most people are doing their best to make the best animals, to care for the animals as best as possible. And to those people, I respect them, and I'm not going to nitpick how they operate. But getting back to my main point, everybody's voice can be heard. Everybody is able to make a difference in the community. Right? If you care enough, find ways to make those connections. Right? Don't be an asshole when it comes to making connections. Something that I see within the community is that some people will be offended by certain things and they'll call it out publicly. They'll name names. And I feel like that is not how things get done. Right? It just causes fear and people begin to tiptoe around you. It just sows dissension and morale drops and it sows fear. And I think that is the immature way to operate when it comes to trying to make a difference in the hobby. So I have 4 kids. And what I say to them anytime they're kind of whining or screaming or throwing a fit to try to, and I know why they're doing it, because they're trying to make their voice heard. They want to be heard. They feel like they're not being heard. And so they'll pout and they'll scream and they'll make a scene. And I always tell them, screaming, complaining, whining is not going to get you anything, right? It'll annoy me, but it's not going to solve any issues. You're not going to get what you want from whining. And so what I see from our community is that we are all grown-ass adults also whining and throwing a fit, trying to be the loudest voice so that people will hear us. And I think we can go about things differently in a better way. So as the Gecko Pod, as this vlog and whatever platform I have, it's not used to bludgeon, but it's used to create conversation and thought and what my goal is really is to bridge people together and make those connections so there's more positivity in the hobby. Sure, every morning I wake up, I look through the feed, stories, posts, and there's always something crazy going on. It never fails that a week goes by without some sort of drama happening. There's always something. When I was coming into this hobby, I remember, a few people. I was brand new. Like I was just chatting everybody up, right? I was just messaging people and asking people tips and advice. And a good handful of people told me that, you don't want to get on anyone's bad side. Otherwise, you're going to be on the shit list. And I was like, that what? Really? That easily? Like, are we that childish? Are we in high school? What's going on? And, a couple seasons later, I've come to agree that we are this childish. We are pretty immature when it comes to how we handle with conflict. And I mean that part to me is the most discouraging part about the hobby is the drama and the fighting, the ego, the pride of thinking, that you're right and whatever the other person that you have issue with is wrong and not even trying to listen. When negative emotions are entered into the chat or into a situation, objectivity begins to be lost, right? Objectivity meaning, okay, we have a problem here. How do we fix it? From point A to point B, what are the steps we need to take to resolve these issues? I don't see that from people. For most people, there is that. So shout out to those people that are able to kind of handle their business and talk calmly and like adults. But a lot of times I see how people aren't even trying to resolve issues. They're just throwing mud, right? They're not trying to resolve a problem of point A, and they're not trying to get to the resolution of point B, right? They don't even care about point B. They just want to like call out point A and throw mud at it and make fun of it and shame each other, and then vice versa. They do the same, back and forth, right? There needs to be resolution. There needs to be resolution in order for us to move forward. And so that part is frustrating in the hobby to see. You know, when it comes to public stuff, I want everybody to feel safe. I want people to not have to tiptoe around each other. You know, how good would it be if we can have conversations that are more fruitful and helpful, where we all learn and grow as people, rather than just mudslinging just for the sake of mudslinging. But what I'm trying to say is, can we be different? Can we withhold some of those emotions and, you know, express it to, you know, your friends on the back end, but not let all your dirty laundry out publicly, right? I don't think it's two-faced if you're doing that. I feel like that's called restraint and self-control. And I feel like if we had more of that, it would be good. Now, on my end, seeing all that stuff, I mean, it's funny. I think it's interesting to see when people kind of fight and go at it publicly. You know, I'll laugh at it. But is it necessary? I don't know. You know, I don't necessarily think it's necessary. But that is our human nature. We're all just prone to ego, you know, puffing our chests, seeing who's smarter, seeing who's louder. But again, going back to what my breeder friend was talking about, we were chatting about when it comes to voice, having a loud voice and swaying the community. I think there is that. And I think there's responsibility on those with louder voices to be able to say certain things and give voice to those that don't have that platform. And so what is the solution? Yes, I do agree that those with a bigger following and a louder voice does sway the community. But that person, whoever has that following, has built that. And so to some degree, people follow them because they like hearing and listening to them. Whether or not that's right or wrong in terms of the message that is conveyed to their followers, that is something that I don't have a solution for. All I can do is use my voice and whatever platform I have to either counteract or encourage certain aspects of that messaging. I know that sounds all kind of like abstract and like, what the hell are you talking about? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yes, loud voices will sway the community. And how we can fix that and take care of that is something that we're also trying to learn together. So if you guys have suggestions in terms of how we can address certain aspects of the hobby and things we see right or wrong, things we want to encourage, things we want to discourage, let me know. Let us know in the comments, in this vlog comments, or, you know, in our DMs or the Gecko Pod. Anytime we have Q&A, feel free to just ask questions that are more thoughtful and geared towards how to be better community members within the hobby. So let us know. Let me know. I'm always happy to learn and grow along with you guys. So I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers. I just know that I have a voice, and whatever I can do, I will try to share my knowledge as hopefully as objectively as possible. So I know I said I would show you guys some animals before, talk about structure and stuff, and I won't do a full video this time since I rambled for a long time already in the beginning about just community stuff and community vibes, things like that. But here's one of my grow outs. This one is from Charcoal and Dilly. And the camera doesn't do it justice, but it's not actually yellow. It looks yellow in this recording, but it's actually a pretty good cream. It has some good white spotting on it too. Let me see if I could get. All right, I think it's pretty bright. It's blinding me, but okay. So, and what's the best way to show animals in the future? So in the future, I think I'm going to right next to my desk here, I took away one of my monitors so that I can have extra desk space over here. Holy crap, it's too blinding. All right, it was too blinding, so I can't do that light. I got to figure out. I'm going to try to put a light box next to my desk right here, so, and then have kind of a hand cam, kind of like what AJ does for his auction, AJ and Gabby. And I'll put in a light box so you guys can see things better and look at things better. But this one's not actually this yellow. It's actually more creamy, has some good white pattern, some good white spots, some snowflake spots that are spreading. It's not, can't see it that great on this thing, but so this one is like an okay animal. I think overall the structure of this is pretty good. The mom and dad have pretty good structure. Charcoal is this animal. I'll show you in a second. I'll try to pop it into this video, but Charcoal has some pretty good structure, and Mom also is a pretty big mom, has pretty good structure as well. So when I say good structure, it has like a good, both those parents have good body structure, meaning they're not like super skinny and lanky, but they're also not kind of round and bulgy, like fat and obese, but they have a good proportion to them, right? They have a good dorsal width. So I like dorsal width. It doesn't have to be like crazy fat, but it should be a good proportion. Obviously that's somewhat subjective, but proportionally to its body, it should look pretty nice, right? And so both parents had that. They had good crest. This one has pretty okay crest. Maybe not the biggest, but pretty decent. And part of the crest, in terms of helping the crest grow bigger, is incubation times. We talked about that with on Nicoletta's episode on the Gecko Pod. We talked about incubation times and head crest and whatnot. And so a lot of people will say that the head crest, the incubation times, longer incubation times up to a certain degree will help develop those crests bigger. So Andrew, White Tank Exotics, he's been kind of testing this out the last couple seasons about incubation times. And he says that the crest and the head develops last. So when you incubate a little bit longer, then it helps develop a little bit more. Lower incubation temps around 71, 72 is usually a good medium to incubate your geckos at. So this past season, I didn't have an incubator. I didn't have either a wine cooler or a cigar humidor that regulates temperatures. Instead, I just moved my tackle box of eggs upstairs and downstairs according to the temps, and that fluctuated a lot, right? In summertime in California, it gets not like super hot, but it gets hot and it fluctuates quite a bit. And so from nighttime, sometimes it would fluctuate down to 68 and spike up to 80, 85. And so I would have to keep having to move my eggs up and downstairs, in my laundry room, under the bed. I don't have a basement. I put it in a cooler for a while, after that episode with Brian and AJ talking about kind of the coolers and what they use in their basements on the East Coast. But I tried that and it didn't work for me. And I talked to Ralph, Cresty Spectrum. He's in Nevada, Las Vegas. And then we have Andrew at White Tank. He's in Arizona. We don't have basements out here, and the temps fluctuate quite a bit. So they got incubators, and I didn't want to throw down for one, but I finally got an incubator. It's right over here. Anyway, so I finally got mine. I put my temperature gauge in there, a Govee temp that I use to track on my phone, and the temp is perfect, between 71 and 72, perfect straight line. Well, pretty straight line within that range. And the eggs I no longer have to worry about the eggs. I don't have to come home because the temps have spiked and it's cooking my eggs, right? So now it's at a happy 71, 72, and it'll allow more incubation times, maybe 90 plus days before they hatch. And so hopefully that'll help them develop a little bit more. For this guy, he was born, when was he born? He was born in May, and so that means he was incubating at cooler temps during the spring, and so this allowed him to kind of develop a little bit better. So he has decent crest. Some of the ones that developed in summertime for me, they hatched quicker because they had these temp flares, and their crests are not as big. Again, some people will disagree with that, but my anecdotal experience, along with several people's anecdotal experience, shows that it might be true. And so for me, I find it to be true. And so that's what I'm going to roll with. I'm going to stick with temps within 71, 72, and see how that does for me this season. So this guy's pretty good. This is a boy, born hatched in May, and he's probably how many grams? I don't know. 15? 15-ish grams. A pretty good cream. I don't know if I'm going to sell him yet, but yeah, maybe. So I'm working on my website. I'm going to start putting animals up on my website, and I'll list some of the ones that I'm producing, take better pictures. And this camera makes it really yellow. It's because of the lighting in here. That help? I'm trying to adjust the temp of the lighting. So anyway, structurally, this is a nice animal. Good crest, good proportions, decent dorsal in terms of its width. The snout, the snout length, it's not too short, but it's also not too narrow. And obviously a lot of these things are subjective. If you like longer snouts or shorter snouts, that's cool. But I find that a good moderate medium between the two is something that most people like. Also, animals that aren't too skinny, but also animals that aren't like overweight and obese. And so, but at the end of the day, you just buy whatever you want. Whatever you like and you think is the best looking, obviously you're going to try to buy. The more pictures you look at, the more nice animals you look at, the more your taste is going to develop, and you'll see that some animals are better than others when you put them side by side. And so, I've seen a lot of animals at shows, and a lot of examples of pictures and whatnot, and I've come to a certain taste in terms of how I like my geckos. And so I like big crests, but not crests that are like completely floppy Dumbo, if that makes sense. I think that's overdoing it a little bit. But there is a level of crest size that I think is important. If it doesn't have a crest, then that's ridiculous because they're called crested geckos. So this one's nice. What's cool about this one is that it has pretty good coverage. And what I mean by coverage is that there's a lot of white pattern on it. So if you look at Foundation Genetics, Anthony just put that thing together. It talks about different patterns, right? Orange pattern and white pattern are kind of fixed colors. And we're not talking about red base or dark base. We're talking about pattern, right? And this animal is a dark based animal. And how you can tell is you look under kind of his crest where his ear is, and also along the patterning. That's his base color, right? Under his mouth too, you see it is dark. That's his dark base color, but the patterning is white patterning. That's what's covering his base color. See, so when we say high coverage, we're talking about the high coverage of patterning. And here in this particular example, it's the patterning color of white. And obviously white is a term that's kind of loose. It can be creamy, but white patterning is what it is called. It's white patterning, high coverage. So anyway, there's this patterning right here. So my projects I'm aiming towards is to have animals that have more coverage, and this one's pretty covered, but also more white. So you see that it's creamy. It's creamy, a little bit of like yellow cream to it, and make it all as white as possible. And when people say drippy, they're talking about the white pattern that is dripping off of the dorsal. And so you see right under the pinning, right under the pins, there's a few dots of white. Sometimes that spreads and drips down, and that's what people mean when they say drippy. So drippy animals, high coverage, more white. That's kind of my project that I'm working on. That's what kind of captured me and brought me into the hobby to work on a more robust main project. That's my main project, basically. And that's kind of AJ's animals too, his frost line. His frost animal is one of the first ones that I bought that kind of drew me in. And that's how I started talking to AJ a lot too. Cool. So if you're a new breeder, or even if you're a breeder that doesn't know all the terms, that's kind of what it is. High coverage, white patterning. The other thing is orange pattern, and that's where the reds come in. That's where the orange covering comes in. And so you have Halloweens, you have other animals with a lot of orangey. Let me see if there's I'm pretty sure I have an example of that. They can still be dark-based animals, but have a lot of orange covering, and that's orange patterning. But this one is classified as a white pattern animal. Okay, so this one is another one that I produced this season, smaller. This one's from Felix and Julia. This one is, his name is Hyperion, and the mom is unnamed. It's an Emerald Paramount. So this is like a double AJ breeder animal that I produced. So I got a Felix Julia from him and then an Emerald Paramount girl, and I made this season. So this pairing was fairly consistent in making this type of look. This one in particular is more tricolor. And so you see some of that orange patterning, right? You also see white patterning. And you also see the dark base. This one you also see a lot of pins, that white pinning. It's not full pins, it's kind of broken on in the back, down the back. But this one's a pretty cool animal. So you see white patterning going on. You see those white spots. Hopefully that spreads. It'll make the patterning of even more kind of tigery. That's where we get the Harley patterns. It's a mix of tiger. You also see a dark base. You see under his cheeks and under his mouth is dark, right? So that's his dark base. So this one's pretty cool. This one's a mixture of stuff. This one's considered a tricolor Harley. I have a few of these actually, so I'll probably sell a few of these. But this one's pretty cool. The white on this is a decent white. Let me see if you can see it there. Obviously it's creamy. You see that creaminess? But it's a decent white in person. So that's another one that's growing out. Let me show you some more animals. All right, this one is cool. This one's also, I think this one's a charcoal absinthe one. This one's a really good cream. Has some pretty good white spotting. You can see a little bit of yellow in there, but it's more white in person. But the coverage is very good on this one, if you can see. Right? You see the dark base again? From his cheeks down along the pins, that black. But all that white patterning is covering his sides. Fairly good structure, right? You see his crest. This one I was hoping it was going to be a girl, but I looped him recently and it's a boy. You can also see him bulge at this point. See, good crest. Snout isn't too long. Seems pretty proportional. Not too skinny and lanky. So obviously if you don't feed them enough, then they're going to be a little bit skinnier and lankier. But also just in general, its general structure is pretty good, just from a standpoint of how it inherited its parents' genes. We'll see how this one develops. This one's probably like, I don't know, 12 grams. I'm not sure. Gotta weigh him. We'll see if I need this boy, but this one's pretty nice so far. Okay, let me show you some more animals. This one is like a really nice Harley. A lot of tiger influence on this one. It's a Harley with a lot of tigering in it. How you can tell that it's not a tiger is that it's not a phantom. And also one of the indicators, at least, of a tiger is that sometimes the tigering pattern breaks into the dorsal, and this one doesn't extend all the way through. So this one's a Harley. Kind of triple X-ish. I don't know. There's all these influences going on, but I would still classify this as just a pretty cool Harley. Again, this one's a dark base because you see around his cheeks the dark patterning that breaks down, or that's the base, and the patterning is the white and orange that is breaking up and is covering the dark base. You see this one has some orange pattern in it, orange and white. This one has decent head structure. It could be better for sure. See, this crests aren't flared out as much as the other ones I showed you. It's a little bit more like an arrowhead almost. But the pattern on this is pretty cool. This one's actually on Morph Market. I'll probably bring this to the Pomona show as well. This one's a boy. This one is a full pin quad stripe. So you can see these quad stripes. They have these linear patterns on its side. See that line down its side on both sides? So that's what makes it a quad stripe. You have the pin stripe going all the way down. This one's, both parents were quad stripes. One of the dad is an EB, empty back, not a full empty back. This one's a little one. This one's okay structure. There's nice fringing on his crest. There's a little bit of a tangerine in its crest too. So we'll see how this one develops. Dark based. I have a lot of dark based stuff. I don't have a lot of yellow stuff. I have a few red things, but most of my stuff is dark based. I like dark based stuff just because of the contrast between the blacks and the whites and the creams, and even the black dark base on red or not red, on orange pattern, I think looks really cool. So you see a lot of Halloweens, the high contrast Halloween orange on black, a dark base, looks so cool. I think those are awesome. This one's pretty cool. Neat little gecko. I'll probably bring this one to Pomona too, or this step. I know there was all this talk about empty backs and super stripes. Brian Butler saying they're the same gene, and then he had a back and forth with Anthony Vasquez, LM, Little Monsters, about kind of this, empty back and super stripe, and the terms of het and homozygous. And het doesn't mean that it's recessive. So Butler was saying that the term het is only used for animals that have the recessive gene, and that's not true in terms of on a scientific definition version of what het is. Heterozygous simply means, Anthony was saying, that it just means that you have one copy of the gene of that trait. And homozygous means that you have two copies of the gene, which means you can see it more prominently, right? And so when it comes to recessive genes of axanthic, if you have one copy, obviously you won't see anything, but you have two copies and it's a recessive gene, then that's why we call it visual axanthics, because then you see the fullness of that gene. But even if it's not a recessive trait, you can still call it het and homozygous. And the het just means it's one copy. So you can call EBs het EBs, and that's a true statement, because maybe they just have one copy of that empty back trait, that gene, and it shows partially. And then if you call them super EBs, which we've been saying, it just says that there's two copies of the gene present in that animal, and you can really see that empty back on its back throughout its dorsal, right? And so that's stuff I learned from AJ and Anthony as we kind of chat on the back end. And we'll talk about that in a future, probably in January, we're going to have an Emtpy Super Stripe episode with little monsters, just like the one we had about Phantom. We got a little bit of kickback and flack for that from a few people, but I think it's all good because we're all just trying to have conversations about what's what. And again, we're all open to learning and hearing from each other, but I think science and proper definitions and terminology will help us as we understand how to use the terminology. This comes from my Het EB dad. So this one's not empty back, but is it Het? I don't know, maybe. I'm still learning, but the definitions are there. You can Google it. Okay, let me show you one more animal. I said I don't have a lot of yellows, and I don't, but this one came from a red lily white and a yellow phantom. And so the red, turns out my red lily white is Het Phantom, and it popped out from a red lily white and a yellow phantom. It popped out this yellow phantom lily white, which is pretty cool. So I learned a lot about phantoms just from my own experience of breeding them this year. So apparently a lot of reds are phantom, or Het for phantom. It's just cool to produce different things and kind of learn how the genetics works. This helps you understand a little bit better. So I only got one. I did that pairing last year. And again, this season, I had a full season this year, and just came out with a bunch of stuff. Came out with some yellow phantoms, came out with a lot of normals, came out with this yellow phantom lily white, came out with some orange lilies. So, a mix of this red and yellow just create these kind of like orangey yellow lily whites. This one's kind of orangey too, but I would still classify these as yellows. But you can see a little bit of that red fringing popping out. See? You see that little bit of a red on his underside. And so underneath of his mouth, you could see a little bit of hint of red, right? So you could tell it came from a red too. It's not just a yellow. So in the Phantom episode, we were talking about, how the dorsal and the laterals are just trying to match and push out pattern, and they're trying to be the same color. But what I found out is for, having chats afterwards, is that a lot of red and yellows, they can look like they're kind of two-tone bicolor, and they still are classified as phantoms. So David at Tiki's was telling me how, back then they would call it bicolor. Like they would call these things bicolors, tigers, and phantoms. And it happens to be they're all the same. They're just all phantom, right? Brian, who was telling me about this too. And so this is why for this yellow, you see a little bit of a two-tone. And this is why what confused me during that episode is that I'm like, but it's not the same, right? The head color is not the same as the sides. And so the reason for that is because of the bicolor nature of how these things were produced in the past. So I'm told, right? And so this is why you see a brighter yellow lateral and a lighter toned yellow dorsal and head, because it's the bicolor, which counts as a phantom. So this one's a phantom, yellow phantom. Anyway, cool. I'll show you guys more animals next time. Let me put this one away. All right. Hope you enjoyed some of those animals. I know that, when I first got into cresteds, I didn't know what's what. No one really pointed out all those minute details of traits and what makes what. And so I know it can be really confusing when it comes to morphs and how everything interact as a new breeder. Like even now I'm learning a lot. There's still so much to learn. And, I chat with Little Monsters and AJ a lot. It's so interesting to see that, we're all still learning. Even Anthony's learning, even AJ's learning, even all these breeders that we kind of buy animals from, we're all learning from each other. And I think there's a lot of good when it comes to the humility aspect of being like, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm still learning. It does put me a little bit at ease knowing that some of these old school long-time breeders are just as also don't know all the details of empty back or soft scale or phantom, I think I actually appreciate that because it helps us as new breeders to be like, we don't have to know everything. Like I'm not going to claim that I'm super well versed and I have all the authority to say X, Y, and Z is this, and this, But what I can tell you and share with you guys is my experience and the things that I've picked up and learned so far from chatting with these breeders. And so hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I'll try to continue to pull out more animals and kind of point out different traits and details and morphs. And obviously I don't have as many morphs as some people do, but since I'm, primarily dealing with extreme Harleys, high coverage, dark based animals, but I'll try to pull up some pictures, and I do have a variety, just not as much as other big breeders. But yeah, I'll try to do that with more animals and things I've learned along the way, and hopefully it's helpful. As you guys hear more about different traits and different morphs and how things interact, and how the genes and genetics work, then between this and the Gecko Pod, hopefully you guys can pick up on a lot. So appreciate you guys. Leave comments below if you want to see anything else, if you want to discuss anything else, if you have comments about all the stuff I talked about when it comes to the community and the vibes of it. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on how you see everything and how we can continue to improve and help the hobby moving forward. So I'll see you guys on the next one.